My name is Megan, and this happened almost 3 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right after I signed the lease on my first solo apartment. I was 23, fresh out of a roommate situation that had gone sideways, and desperate for a quiet place of my own. I found a decent unit in an older four-story building downtown. Brick exterior, hardwood floors, a little dated, but charming. The rent was lower than everything else I'd looked at in that neighborhood, which, in hindsight, should have told me something. But at the time, I just felt lucky. My landlord was a wiry older man named Mr. Whitfield, probably in his early 70s, who managed the building himself instead of through a company. He was courteous during the walkthrough, pointed out the good water pressure, the working radiator, the quiet neighbors. Everything seemed normal. I signed the lease that same afternoon. On move-in day, right before he handed me the keys, Mr. Whitfield said something that struck me as odd. He said, "One more thing. If you ever hear someone counting outside your door at night, counting numbers out loud, slow, do not open it. Wait until they stop." I actually laughed a little, thinking it was some kind of joke. He didn't laugh. He just held my gaze for a second and said, "I'm serious. Don't open the door while they're counting. Wait for silence." Then he handed me the keys and left. I told my brother about it in the parking lot, and we both agreed it was strange, but figured maybe there'd been some incident in the building before. I didn't think much more of it. The first couple of weeks were unremarkable. I settled into my routine, started my new job, met a couple of neighbors in passing. Everything felt normal, maybe even a little boring, which after the chaos of my old living situation was exactly what I wanted. Then, about 3 weeks in, I woke up around 1:15 in the morning to a voice outside my apartment door. It was counting. Slow, even, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. A man's voice, low and flat, with long pauses between each number, like he had all the time in the world. My whole body went rigid. I remember lying there in the dark, staring at my ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I swallowed. I thought immediately of what Mr. Whitfield had said, and for a second I almost didn't believe I was actually hearing it until it continued. 4, 5, 6. I didn't move. I didn't get up to look through the peephole. I just lay there, gripping the edge of my blanket, listening to a stranger count numbers outside my apartment in the middle of the night. It got to somewhere around the low 20s before it just stopped. No footsteps walking away, no door closing somewhere else in the hallway. It just stopped, mid-sequence, like someone had simply lost interest or been told to be quiet. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, I convinced myself it had to be a drunk neighbor, someone messing around, a weird prank. But when I ran into Mr. Whitfield later that week and mentioned it, trying to keep my tone light, his expression shifted immediately. He asked very directly, "Did you open the door?" When I told him no, he nodded slowly and said, "Good. Whatever you do, don't open the door while they're counting. It only matters if you open the door." He wouldn't explain further no matter how I pressed him. Over the following 2 months, it happened 4 more times, always overnight. Always that same low, patient counting voice, always stopping somewhere in the 20s or 30s before going silent. Each time, I stayed frozen in bed, waiting it out, refusing to look. It became a strange, dreaded ritual. The 4th time it happened, I had my coworker Danielle staying over. She'd decided to crash on my couch rather than call a cab. Around 2 a.m., I heard my phone buzz on the nightstand. A text from Danielle, sent from the next room even though she could have just called out to me. It said, "Do you hear that? Someone's counting outside. I'm not opening the door." My stomach dropped. It wasn't in my head. Someone else had heard the exact same thing. We compared notes the next morning over coffee, both of us a little shaken. She described the voice almost word for word the way I would have. Flat, male, unhurried. The kind of voice that didn't sound angry or excited, just methodical, like counting was simply a task being performed. After that, I started asking around the building. Most people brushed off my questions, but one older woman on the 4th floor, after a long pause, finally said, "Every tenant who stays here long enough hears the counting eventually. As long as you don't answer, it stops on its own. Nobody I know has ever opened the door while it's happening." When I asked what she thought would happen if someone did, she just shook her head, said she didn't know anyone willing to find out. I lived in that apartment for another year after that first incident. The counting continued sporadically, never on any predictable schedule, sometimes weeks apart, once almost 2 months of silence in between. I never opened the door. Eventually, I moved when my lease was up, told myself it was for a shorter commute. Though, if I'm honest, I don't think I could have stayed indefinitely without eventually wondering what number it would reach, or what would happen if I finally looked. I never found out who was counting, or why, or what would have happened if I'd opened that door. I moved across town over a year ago now, and most nights I don't think about it at all. But every so often, usually late, lying in the dark in my new apartment, I catch myself listening for a voice that starts with 1, just to make sure it isn't there.